Welcome to Chapter 18 of Midnight Howl by Claire Hutton and published by Scholastic. Chapter 18. The next day I was totally on edge. By the time my alarm clock went off, and I had already been lying awake in bed for an hour staring at the ceiling and trying to breathe slowly. It was the day of the full moon. It was easy to tell myself to forget something, but it was much harder to actually do it. At breakfast, I couldn't help watching Haley. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes were glowing, and her hair shone. She looked excited, and that made me nervous. Marisol. From the tone of Jack's voice, I could tell that this wasn't the first time he had said my name. Oops. What? I said, making sure to turn away from Haley. Pass the milk, please, he said. Jeez, are you okay? You've been staring blankly across the table for like 10 minutes. Sorry, I said, and I passed the milk to him. I'm fine, I'm just a little tired. Jack was looking at me curiously, and I smiled weakly at him. It's a beautiful day, Haley said cheerfully. It's the kind of day when it feels good to be alive. Whenever I saw Haley during the day, she looked alert and intense. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't help being aware of her. At lunch, I was sitting and talking with Amber and Lily when Haley appeared smiling. Have you seen? She asked, setting her lunch tray down on the table. What? Said Amber. I haven't seen anything except today's mystery meat special. Look, Haley said, pointing across the cafeteria. We'd been expecting Bonnie to show up eventually. She had gym right before lunch, so she had to change, but there she was, sitting at a table with one other person, Anderson. They were totally focused on each other, smiling and laughing as they gazed into each other's eyes. Holy cow, said Amber. Do you think they're like a couple? She said she thought he was cute, I remembered out loud. I looked over at Bonnie's smile. I couldn't imagine liking Anderson. He was so high-strung and hyper, but she looked happy. That's Bonnie, said Haley. If she wants something, she makes it happen. She nodded. That's the only thing to do, I've realized. You can't wait around for things to happen to you. Lily looked at her curiously. Is there something you want to do, Haley? She asked. Haley shrugged. I'm just sort of talking about life, you know. Lily smiled back at her. I get it. I wasn't sure that I did. Was Haley acting this way because of the full moon? Bonnie caught us watching her and waved, grinning at us to stop staring. Haley drummed her fingers on the table, looking impatient. Hey, she said suddenly to Lily and me. Are you two going out with your telescopes tonight? Isn't it a full moon? No, Lily said, with a little line appearing between her eyebrows as she frowned. Remember, we stay in the full moon because of the wolves. Haley rolled her eyes. You know, she said stubbornly, wolves aren't so dangerous. They don't just suddenly attack people. Lily stared at her. Wolves are dangerous, Haley. They don't bite people for fun, but it's still not a good idea to get close to them. They're territorial. They're wild animals. They're not friendly. She rubbed irritably at the crescent moon-shaped birthmark on her arm. Haley rolled her eyes again, and the line between Lily's eyebrows got deeper, and she opened her mouth as if she was going to say something, hesitated, and then closed it again. Of course, I thought. Maybe Haley already knows about wolves. After school, at the astronomy club meeting, Anderson slid into the desk next to mine. Psst, he hissed out the side of his mouth. Hey, psst, Marisol. Shh, I said, listening to the presentation. He huffed and fished around in his backpack. A minute later, a note landed on my desk. There's the note. It's the full moon tonight. I found out where Bonnie lives. Oh, sorry, not Bonnie. It's the full moon tonight, he wrote. I found out where Bonley lives, and Bonnie and I are going to stake out his apartment. He won't be there if he's a werewolf, and in his absence will be a clue. Want to come? Bring some silver just in case. I had almost forgotten Anderson's suspicion that the gym teacher was a werewolf. I really didn't think he was, but what did I know? As long as he and Bonnie left Haley alone, Anderson's theory didn't matter. I also didn't really think that Bonnie would want me coming along, though. I can't come, but thanks for asking, I whispered. Let me know what happens, and be careful. Anderson nodded seriously. Roger, he said, will do. After astronomy club, Lily and I sat together on the activities bus. She seemed irritable, glaring out at the sun, which was already low on the horizon. What are you and Anderson passing notes about? She asked suddenly. Did he say anything about Bonnie? Lily turned and stared at me. He thinks Mr. Bonley house tonight in case he's a werewolf. Lily turned and stared at me. He thinks Bonley's a werewolf? She said. He's really a nut. This is so different from her earlier, more relaxed view on Anderson's obsession that I might have looked surprised because her eyes narrowed. You don't believe him, do you? She asked. No, I said. Lily frowned at me. You sound like you were going to say but. You couldn't possibly think Mr. Bonley's a werewolf. Anderson just hates doing push-ups. Well, I hesitated, then leaned closer to her, looking around to make sure no one was listening to us. I wasn't going to do anything about my suspicions, but it might help to talk to Lily. She would never hurt Haley. I'm not talking about Mr. Bonley. There's someone else I'm worried about. There's been some weird stuff I've noticed, and it seems crazy, but I can't help but wondering that she might be a werewolf. Lily stiffened. Have you talked to anyone else about this? I shook my head. No, and you can't either. You have to promise not to repeat this, not even to her, I said, especially not to her. Who are you talking about? Lily's eyes went wide. I took a deep breath. Haley. I think Haley might be a werewolf. Are you crazy? Lily asked. She shook her head. Honestly, Marisol, Haley's been like the shyest girl at school forever, and she's finally starting to come out of her shell, and you're calling her a werewolf? I thought you were her friend. I am her friend, I objected. But listen. Haley put up her hand to stop me. I had never seen her look so angry. Just stop it, she growled. Marisol, there are no werewolves. She whipped around to stare at the window and ignored me for the rest of the ride. As the bus stopped to let me off, I got to my feet, then paused next to our seat. Sorry, Lily, I said softly. She didn't answer. Great, now Lily was mad at me, I sighed. Should have just kept my thoughts to myself. I climbed off the bus and headed toward the house. Jack had gone to a friend's after cooking club, and I was sorry that he wasn't there. I could have used a friend to take my mind off of Haley.